an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering The Magicians, Season 2, Episode 13. We have brought you little cakes. In this episode, so apparently we're just going to be in full-on god-killing mode in this show every season. And while Martin Chatwin was god-like and didn't have any parents left to care whether or not he lived or died, unfortunately, Umber and Ember are not in that situation, and things go poorly. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everybody. I am Natasha. Huge thank you to Nicole for commissioning this episode. Guys, I had no idea that this was the finale episode of the season until I, was done with it. And then when it went back to, the Netflix, when I went back to the Netflix menu, it said Season 3. And, of course, I don't mean that in that, this didn't feel like a finale at all, because it definitely did. But I just, for some reason, had it in my head that the season was going to be longer. And I don't know why, because this first season was the same number of episodes, I'm pretty sure. So I was just caught kind of off guard by how drastic a turn the story winds up taking. I really liked it. I thought that this was rad, but I was also, really surprised by it, because I kind of thought we were going to transition into oh, the gods are here, they're trying to chase me, or God knows what. Just shutting off magic. I mean, didn't know that was just an option, that we could just shut it off. I guess it's called the Wellspring, and they have a plumber, so it's sort of treated as if it's just an underground well that's supplying the plumbing system for magic throughout different worlds. I have a lot of questions about this, though, so we're going to get to that. But first of all, let's deal with the many things that lead up to what happens in this episode. So when we start this one off, we are back with Alice and Quentin. And Quentin is apparently, Alice has been burning herself because she, as she puts it, I miss the fire. And understandably, Quentin is pretty concerned by this, and he makes this potion that will keep her from harming herself. I find it kind of interesting and a neat turn of events, in a way, that when we first meet Quentin, he is, we are flashing in between the present and past, where he had been in a mental hospital, and now he is sort of trying to serve as that kind of function for Alice. He's kind of trying to be her rehab. And I sort of like how much this show copes with that sort of, I'm saying sort of a lot. I like how this show copes with the idea of recovery. And they do it for a variety of different types of trauma. So Quentin has his depression and mental illness, which was really bad. Julia has her trauma from rape, and also from being low-key forced to do things against her will because her shade was taken away. That's something that she made choices, but it wasn't really her. It's the same as agreeing to do something while you're drugged. It doesn't really count in my mind. And then, there's Elliot, who is a drug addict and is trying his best to not fall into some of these more destructive habits. And I just find it very compelling that each of our characters has something that they sort of particularly struggle with. But even though they are all different, they have threads that are recognizable to one another. So Elliot hasn't gone through what Julia has gone through, but when he sees her huddled up on the couch, flipping out, he knows anyway. It doesn't have to be the exact same situation. It's still recognizable behavior to him. And I think that's really kind of beautiful in a way. The older I get, the more I'm just like, trauma is the thing that binds us. Like, love and patience and everything all stems from compassion. And compassion comes from understanding other people's experiences might be different from yours, but are still difficult and painful. And so in my mind, even though we all wish that we didn't go through the things that we went through, and I'm not trying to suggest that if you suffered some kind of trauma at the hands of someone abusive, that it's a good thing. Please do not mistake me for saying that at all. But I am saying that those things inform our ability to feel compassion for other people, which I think expands our potential for caring about other people and connecting with them. It doesn't always work out that way. It can cause us to cut ourselves off and make us less receptive to connecting to other people. It all depends on the person, the situation, how you decide to handle it, and what kind of resources you have available to you. But I think that there is a silver lining to some of it at times that can at least get us to connect with other people who have a trauma that we can sort of bond over. And sometimes that's very valuable, So anyway, yeah. And meanwhile, talking about trauma, Penny has basically this incredibly aggressive type of cancer from being in the poison room. They are not entirely sure what is causing it. Like, they know that it was the poison room and that there were some like wards and spells over it. But they're not entirely sure that these things were laid by magicians. If they were, then it's possible they can crack the code and help Penny out. If not, they tell him that he has about 3 weeks before he dies. Which, like, no pressure. 3 weeks to just, accomplish all the shit that you want to accomplish so that you don't feel like your life has been a waste. Wow. Ouch. That sucks. So he basically hauls himself out of bed, and the doctor is trying to argue with him and keep him in place. And he looks at her and is just like, if you think that I am just going to lay here in bed and wait to die, you're insane. So he starts changing and Katie shows up, and it turns out Katie is using again. This makes total sense, but it fucks me up real bad to see her do this. I really enjoy Katie as a character. And it's an interesting sort of combo of events here. I think it's the betrayal of Julia and not getting Reynard killed because she thought that's what she had signed up for. It is the fact that she killed a man under duress. He forced her to do it for nothing. And now she probably has some pretty violent, horrible memories because we saw her hands. She was soaked in blood to the fucking elbow. I don't know what that looked like, but I imagine it doesn't look great in her memories. And also, the man that she loves, who she has only just managed to reconnect with, is dying. Yeah, one could say she has a few reasons to turn to something to ease the pain. And I am just really worried about her. And I hope that they're able to figure something out to help her, because what I really want, if I were to have an ideal scenario in this, I would want her to see what Julia is going through now that she has her shade back, and recognize that Julia isn't having as easy a time of this as I think Katie believes she is. Because I don't think Katie is aware yet, correct me if I'm wrong, that Julia's shade is back at all. I don't know that, I think she like took off before she saw that that was what was happening. So I think recognize, again, the trauma bond, recognizing that Julia is experiencing the fallout just as hard as she is, might help her feel a little bit less enraged. I am not positive of that. I would hope, but I don't see her being able to encounter Julia and recognize that sort of behavior that indicates her shade is back without agreeing to see Julia first. And I don't feel like she is going to agree to that. And what I mean is, like, she could run into Julia out in the world, and I guess Julia could just tell her, hey, I got my shade back. But I would like Katie to see Julia in the state that Elliot saw Julia in, curled up on the couch, whimpering, because I want Katie to realize that Julia didn't do what she did in letting Reynard get away simply because she didn't have her shade and she like felt no compassion. I want her to realize that like Julia is paying her own price for things. And also, I would like to point out that, like, I had been very frustrated with the fact that Julia did not pull the trigger right away. Now, I stand by that. Not only should she have pulled the trigger right away, but she should not have stepped out from a protected position. She should have sniped him from the bushes. However, now that we are getting to a story where the parents of a god really have something to say about the fact that a human killed one of their children, it makes sense story-wise why Julia could not kill Reynard. Because then what? Persephone is just going to be like ready to take out her vengeance on Julia. Now, not that that wouldn't make a good story, but I think we can all agree Julia's kind of like been through it. And for her to be the reason magic is shut off, I don't know that she could fucking take it. Like, I already feel like she gets blamed for so much that on top of everything would just be... I don't know that she could come back from that, even if she knew that it wasn't her fault. Because other people would have to, like... The story would get around. Even if she, I don't know what that would look like, but I imagine people would begin to figure out what had happened here. And I want to know how many people are aware by the end of this episode why magic was turned off. Are they blaming Quentin and like, because Julia was involved, even though she wasn't the direct reason. She did bring Umber back into Fillory by using the snow globe. So while she isn't it wasn't a result of like the plot that only involved her and Katie, she's still like a factor. But so are Elliot and Margot and everybody. So like, I'm just really curious how much blame they are sustaining, how much people know, and whether or not it was considered a fair trade-off. Like, I feel as if a lot of people who were closer to the situation do feel that they did what they needed to do, because otherwise they might have lost magic anyway, because Fillory would be destroyed. At least this way, we know it's been turned off, but the potential for it to be turned back on is still there. However, if you're not close enough to the situation to have that information, you might just hate them and just be like, these are the fucking people who lost magic on us. Like, great, thanks, guys, you know? And we don't really get to see a ton of that because the episode does wrap pretty quickly. So I am super duper curious about it. So anyway, back to Katie. She is talking to Penny, and she tells him that Reynard is gone, but not dead. She says, I should be happy, but it wasn't how I wanted it. It's not enough. And she says, I feel like bashing my head into a wall. Guys, oof. Is that the most familiar thing? She says that, and then she follows it up with, why can't anything just be fixed? And that is the worst feeling. And man, is it relatable. Like, I cannot emphasize enough how much that sentence and feeling resonates with me. Why can't anything just be fixed? The fact that life is essentially continual, like, efforts at balancing something that wants to unbalance itself is so depressing. It's beautiful in its way. It's also depressing and bleak and feels very futile and mean-spirited. And I just really get what, like, her whole fucking headspace right here. It just is the worst. So she's, you know, of course, worried about Penny leaving. And by leaving, I mean dying. And it's just like, she asks, what are we going to do? And he says, let's not waste time being mad. I'm going to go find Quentin and Elliot. I got to make a couple pit stops first. And then we go to New York. And Julia is laying on the couch smoking. And she is having these little flashes of, and it's hard for me to tell because some of it, I think, are things that happened to her. There is the cleaning up of the blood for after she was raped. You know, we see a flash of that. But also I think there's some flashes of things that she has done. And it's just a lot of different, like, awful images that are flashing through her mind. And she's, like, shaking. And this actress really, I feel so bad because I've said before that her character has just required Julia to be on the borderline of screaming desperation since almost day one, near tears most of the time, and in a general state of emotional upheaval that is probably extremely draining to sustain as an actress. And she finally got a little bit of a break from that when her shade was gone. But now that it's back, she has to return to this, like, kind of weepy. And when I say weepy, there's, like, a real dismissive sound to that word, but I don't mean it that way. Just, you know, she's back in this place. And I feel bad for her in some ways that she has to do this again. So Elliot comes in and tries to make small talk. Bless him. He asks Julia if she's okay. And she says, I'm whole again. And he realizes what that means. And he says, and that's good, right? But, you know, you can tell as he's saying it, I know that's not. Yikes. So she asks how she can help. She knows that he is here to get something from her. And he asks her about an amulet that would make her invisible to a god. And that Q told him that she knows how to make one. And she holds the one out for him, and he's about to grab it and just, like, take it and walk away. But he can't do it. And he turns around. I really enjoy Elliot's feeling of responsibility here. This is not somebody who feels comfortable expressing emotion. In many ways, I relate to Elliot in this way. I tend to be the person who is like, who winds up in charge simply because I have a very big personality and I often am like the center of parties and a host and all of this stuff. A lot of his personality I identify with a lot. And much of that is because I genuinely enjoy that stuff. And much of that is also because it sort of keeps people at arm's length a little bit. And once it becomes time to be vulnerable with somebody in a real way, it is awfully difficult. And I manage it occasionally and almost always try and recover from it like faster than I really should. I need to just like be okay and let it happen sometimes. And I'm not great with that. But at the same time, when it is on behalf of someone else, it's a lot easier. If I am having an emotional breakdown because of my own shit going on in my own life, I find that way more difficult to stomach than if it's because I'm helping support somebody else get through some shit. So I really understood this moment where he just straight up tells her, like, I don't know what you've been through, but I really recognize what's going on with you right now as something that I have gone through. And she tries to say, well, then you know that I want to be alone. And he's like, yeah, I do know that that's what you want. And I also know that's probably not what you need. I think, actually, that you should come with me and help me with this quest because you need something to do. You need to get out of this room, out of this house, off of the couch. Not because you're being self-indulgent. It's not like he's accusing her of just like wallowing. He's just kind of saying, this is bad for you. Like staying where you can, where all you're doing is thinking about this is going to be bad for you. We need to get your brain circling around other shit. And I want to mention too, and I've said this before, Elliot is not really my type, but damn, is he working this suit. What? He looks fly as hell. He's got this like charcoal shirt with like a navy polka dot tie, a black, like sort of almost, I'm trying to think what the word is because it's not checkered exactly, but vest. And then he's got like the dark charcoal, almost black jacket over it. It looks great. And his hair is like stringy and unwashed, but still looks good. Like, what is with people who manage to do that? Who manage to have like dirty hair and still like make that work? That's so unfair. Like, rude, you know? But yeah, he says, I want you to help me convince Umber that we should keep Fillory because I have never met anyone who is less willing to take no for an answer. And she says something about how, well, remember though, I'm the one that betrayed you. And he takes a deep breath and just goes, that was a long time ago. And honestly, it wasn't really, but like, I'm sure it feels like fucking years have passed. Like, yeah, understandable. He has been through a lot. So he says, want to put some pants on and help me save all of magic? And she gets this sort of like watery smile that I really like. And I feel like he's sort of hit on it for her. Like she is somebody who functions well when she has a specific goal in mind. So we have the, I forgot that Julia and Katie meet up here in the, what do you call it? Arctic school. What do you call this spot? Where the Russian teacher is? I can't remember if there's like a name for this like outlying province or what. But yeah, Penny, he is going to find Quentin and Elliot, and we find out later that he read parts of their books. Break Bills South. Thank you, Ashley. we find out that he read Elliot's book and he knows that what Elliot is about to try doesn't work. So Elliot needs to try doing something else because there's just a 20 blank pages at the end of the book. And meanwhile, Katie and Julia, their confrontation is really not a confrontation at all. Katie just like tells her, oh yeah, I'm getting high again, and then walks away. And that's pretty much it. And Julia doesn't really get a chance to explain anything to her or try and justify herself, which honestly I think is for the best. Katie is not in a place to hear that right now. So yeah, they have to figure out a way to basically sidestep the original plan that Elliot was going to embark on while still going for that goal. They need to figure out a different approach. And he wants to, his initial thing is just to like try and appeal to him and get him to not destroy Fillory. And then he starts realizing that maybe we just need to put on like a huge show and entertain him. And what we find out they are going to do in the end is use this like basically god catnip to lure him to the castle, and then have this like confrontation set up with his brother who will convince him to, I don't know if like the whole idea is that, because what it feels like they want, is just for Umber to be the balancing force against the chaos of Ember. But what I think they're really hoping for is for these two to like make up and continue ruling in Fillory together. And I don't think they thought through precisely how this was going to look. Because, of course, jumping ahead a little, what winds up happening is that when Umber reappears, Ember, who had, of course, thought his brother was dead this entire time, realizes that his brother did not, in fact, die in a brave attempt to protect him, as he had been believing, but instead was made a deal with this dude and fucking bailed, which is really, 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 really shitty. And this leads to a confrontation between the two of them that doesn't go great. And I'm surprised that nobody really like thought about the fact that this would happen. We'll talk about that in a second. So yeah, this is when Elliot realizes that he needs to try something different. Penny and Katie are talking, and he says that he is going to have to button up one last thing. And she's like, but I made a portal to Tahiti. We have got to get out of here. What are you talking about? You warned them. You told me that was all you needed to do. And she says, none of it matters, Penny. And then all of a sudden, there they are in the library, and the head librarian comes and tells him that he needs to come to an emergency meeting. And it's amazing because Katie says something about how he's dying. And I was like, yeah, did he mention the fact to you, Katie, that he like signed a contract beyond death? Like, his death doesn't matter to them at all. It's very, very much like there's a meme I saw about capitalism and how if you died, your boss would show up at your funeral weeping, saying, how could you do this to me? We are so understaffed today. Like, your death is not the fucking concerning part. It's the fact that they need to fill in for you now, which is very annoying, and thanks a lot. And that's kind of where we are with the library. They're just like, yeah, so he's dying. Whatever. It's fine. He can still work. Whatever. And he will still be able to work afterwards as well. So, yeah, puts him on strict probation, but most assuredly does not mean that he is excused from work. We'll take every step to keep him comfortable. And she tells Katie knowledge itself is at stake. that is more important than any single one of us. And Katie is in the middle of arguing, and she suddenly like blinks and is back in Breakbill South alone, and he has stayed in the library, and she like just screams and just, you know, throws a couple of things off of a table. And honestly, I feel that is a fair response. Like, yeah, Katie, I feel for you, girl. I really do. I like Katie so much. I feel like she's one of the few people that like consistently has pretty rational responses to things. And it's sort of funny, you know, knowing that she isn't a character in the original books. It feels so, I don't know if telling is an unfair word, but it's weird to me, at least, that one of the characters that I like the very best isn't somebody who the writer of the series actually created himself. So we go to Fairyland. As it turns out, the castle where the fairies are is like overlaid over the castle that Elliot and Margot and everybody lives in. They are on a slightly different plane of reality, but they're in the same building. So when we see the castle, it's like the same Fillory castle, but it's coated in flowers and vines. I mean, it is just very lush looking. And Margot and Josh are here to save Fen. Fen, it turns out, has already given birth, I guess, because her stomach is flat. She looks really fucked up. She seems pretty traumatized. And she's like, I am not leaving without my baby. And Margot is trying to insist to her that, yeah, you are. You are definitely going to be coming with us, whether you like it or not. And they're in the middle of breaking her out of this basically dungeon when one of the fairies interrupts and it's like, oh, here you are. And it's amazing. These two really thought that they were like getting away with something, but it appears that the fairies are mostly aware of what's happening. The fairies are interesting. They're all sort of shrouded in this weird drapey tunic of white weird fabric, and they're all sort of wearing a unitard underneath it that makes it look almost like they're naked, but not really. It's almost like they're in like pajamas with really billowy bathrobes, and they each are very androgynous. There's not like, you know, the person who comes to the door and is like, oh, there you are. Male or female, do not know, does not appear to matter. The queen is taking a bath and is just like, you made a deal when they get brought to her. And Margot says, just tell me what you want. And the queen says, the child is mine. Now on to business at hand. Now, guys, I would like to know who on the writing staff decided that taking a bath when you are in a position of power is like the ultimate power move. Because this is a very close repeat of Alice and her mother the first time that we meet them. And there is just something about this scene and the actress playing the queen that feels really, really similar to Alice's mother. It just like, it feels like they're hitting a lot of the same notes with the vibe overall. And even this like design of the bathtub is really similar. So the queen says Umber is dangerously bored of Fillory. You underestimated how devastating it can be to displease a god. And Margot's like, we've been trying to get a hold of him for months and he just ignores us. And the queen's like, yeah, because every time you get in touch with him, you're trying to ask him for things. Why don't you try offering him something instead? It's in our shared interest for your king to succeed. So I actually am inclined to help him. Margot says, Josh, Fen, the baby, and I will go right now. And she's like, lol, no, that's not how this is going to work at all. And she gives them this weird plant and tells them that it will draw ember. You'll need to bake it into, and Margot interrupts and says, yeah, little cakes, I know. And yeah, this is like the extent of the help. Point the way back. And they both go, as soon as I've exacted the toll. Travel from this world costs, dear. I don't make the rules. Oh, that's right. Yes, I do. And when she reappears in the regular castle human, I suppose, one of her eyes is missing. Rough. I really want to know, because later on, when Fen comes back through, she says that she gave up her toes. I want to know what they're doing with all these body parts. Like, are they just saving them somewhere? Are they putting them together to create a whole new person? Like, what are they doing? So at this point, Elliot goes to Quentin and asks him for his help in trying to get Umber to come back to Fillory. And what winds up happening is Umber is determined to show Quentin his new world that he is creating and get some feedback on it. And it's unsurprisingly, because he is a god of order, extremely boring. Everything about the way the world is built, the furniture, the plates, the food, the buildings, is all straight lines, right angles, and just really monotonous and dull. It reminded me in some ways of Camazotz, the world that Meg and all of her friends go to when they are trying to save Charles Wallace in A Wrinkle in Time. Or they're trying to save her father first. Spoilers. But yeah, it's just like amazing to me. This winds up being like apparently part of the plan, because I guess Julia went and grabbed up the snow globe that the world is in, the pocket reality, pocket world, pocket universe. But in the moment when Umber is trying to get him to come, he like asks Quentin, and when Quentin hesitates, he like sort of laughs at him and is like, you know, I'm a god, right? I'm not really asking you. So here we go. And it's a nice moment, because it really does fool us into thinking that this is not what he wants to do, when in fact it's pretty much exactly what he wants. Meanwhile, back at the castle, Elliot comes in to the throne room, and his son is sitting there on the throne and is just like ready to fight, until his father follows Elliot in a moment later and is just like, hey, put that down. What are you doing? Like, you know, the whole thing. And there's a nice moment where they're like wondering whether or not, since they got sort of interrupted, their marriage actually took. And they decide to try it out and kiss each other. And honestly, these two have some chemistry. Like, okay, I'm sorry, Fen, you're about to be backseated. Like, that sucks for you, but these two, come on. So, yeah, Margot has this amazing, like, fucking eye patch made that's very decorative, and Elliot apologizes to her for throwing her in the dungeon and tells her, I know that you were just doing your best in an impossible situation that would have crushed anyone, myself included. And I appreciate his apology here. I don't entirely agree with him. I understand why she made the deal that she made in general. It's not that I have the problem with. It's the fact that she chose to lie for a while and let Fen worry that she was losing her mind. Like, there's just a lot that I think Margot did not handle well about this. And I understand that for the sake of simplicity and for them to move on as friends, that they need to get past this and put it in simple terms. But there's a lot more going on here than just, she starts crying. They are trying to, she says something about how it's not working. We're trying to banter our way through this situation. And it's not something that we can really do this with. We can't just blow past it. She says, it's not the same. Let's not pretend it is, okay? And, I mean, that's fair. Friendships change. And while it is a beautiful thing to have a friendship that just seems like you would never reach this point with somebody, we all fuck up. We all do stuff that, like, looking back on it, we're like, why did I handle this way? And I have had friendships that I really thought could, like, weather through things that it turns out they could not. And I don't feel like Elliot and Margot have to worry about their friendship just, like, folding in on itself. They just have to sort of work through the fact that they have found the line. They have found the point at which the other is not able to trust them as easily and would be willing to literally lock them up. And that's gonna change the way that you see your friendship. When you are operating as if that line does not exist, it makes you a little cocky, almost. And I think boundaries are very important. And I think ultimately it will be good for the two of them that they have found theirs and that they are laying out those rules and figuring this all out. But in the short term, it's painful and it feels like a betrayal at times. Because you just really thought that, like, oh, well, they'll be okay. And it turns out, no, they're not, actually. So, yeah, I actually really liked this scene. And the fact that even though Elliot tries to just apologize, the show is acknowledging that it can't really come down to something that simple. He can't just be like, I'm sorry I locked you up. You were doing your best. And her being like, yeah, I was. Thanks for noticing. Okay, now we're friends again. Not going to be like that. So we have a really weird scene as all of these nobles are coming in and guys, I'm not entirely sure because, like, Elliot and Margot are sitting on their thrones and I'm assuming that they had new thrones made at this point. But in any case, because, curse. But yeah, he says, I threw better orgies when I was 10, which I find really fucking horrifying. And it really does feel like a very sedate, boring party. Everybody needs to fucking get drunk. We need some fucking pounding music in here. Like, this is just, this is tough. So, Josh rolls in his cart covered in little cakes that are supposed to lure the god inside. And nothing is really happening yet. It's not happening right away. And then we cut to the world that Quentin is in, and his like linguini and his feedback on all of that. And there is a really fast series of cuts back and forth here. So eventually Umber comes in and is surprised to see Elliot. And it's like, didn't I banish you? And he is really actually excited at the fact that this guy was banished and is back anyway, because it's a twist. He really didn't see that coming. And he's very entertained by this. He loves it. And Elliot says, we've fallen down on the job, but boredom is death. And he says, I agree. Isn't it though? We can make Fillory more exciting and watchable than ever. That's our pitch. It's a new chapter, and the title is Shit Tons of Drama and Surprise. And I really enjoy this because of how much it seems to be like referencing the show itself. I know that there is a danger of getting too meta so that something is basically being shoved up its own ass, and that's fair. I mean, I can feel that way about some things, but I feel like they're hitting a pretty good medium here. So they're suggesting to him that we shake things up rather than destroy. Meanwhile, they're eating all of these little cakes, or he is, and everybody around them is being signaled to laugh at all of these jokes, the mention of turning people into rats. Like, they have to really act as if this is the most entertaining thing. And they're in the middle of describing all of the beautiful things that he built and all of the accomplishments that he has under his belt, when Margot makes the mistake of mentioning his brother. And he begins to go off about everything his brother is, and simpering, weak. And then we go to his brother with Quentin saying greedy, promiscuous, selfish, credit-hogging, mouse-eating slob. And I just love the cut between the two of them, where it feels like so on the nose, but not in a way that's like annoying. And also, can we just like really briefly talk about how hot the human version of Umber is? Because it makes me really uncomfortable, but like, he cute. He real cute. I like him. Hi. So yeah, the whole conversation ends with him saying, well, let's get it over with. Let's start right now. And he thinks, when he says this, like, what he's thinking is that he is agreeing with Margot and Elliot, who are saying how difficult it has been to rule over Fillory. So he believes that he is doing them a favor by deciding to just destroy this world right now. And they're saying we meant make it better, less whimsical, more meaner, maybe, more you. But the whole place is falling down around their ears while they're having this conversation. And as this is happening, we go to Umber, who is saying that the place is beyond saving. We can't go back. I won't go back, actually. But there's a real tone to his voice as he says it, as though he is trying to convince himself, because he most definitely does kind of want to go back. He feels guilty, and also, like, this is a guy who likes order, and the idea of just abandoning his brother and leaving this world to die, I don't think sits super well with a god of order. So then we have Julia walk into the throne room and begin to shake the snow globe, and all of a sudden there are Umber and Quentin in the middle of the throne room. Umber's horns are back, and his brother sees him and is just like, what? And starts to be really joyful and delighted at the fact that he is alive, and then he realizes the truth of what the fuck this means and begins to get quite enraged. And they start to fight. And eventually, Julia, she has this fucking sword. And guys, remind me where they got this god-killing sword. Does this have like the bullet worked through it or something? The bullet that she made out of the energy that they took from the senator. But regardless, she has a sword in her hands, and because she does, Umber is just seeing her as the threat and begins to go after her by choking her. But then the sword disappears from her hands, and Quentin has it in his and stabs Umber in the back with it. And Umber, against all reason, begins smiling and laughing as he realizes what Quentin did, because it's such a surprise that he never saw that coming. So he had already killed his brother, BT Dubs, by the time this happens. So when they go down, both of the gods are dead. Like, there are no remaining gods in Fillory. However, later on, because it seems at this point like this is just a success, that Quentin succeeded in saving the world, we find out later that the gods have parents who care, and they are going to handle this shit. Ashley's in the chat. She says, she magicked the sword into a god-killing sword while Umber was dying. She used Umber's magic to power up the sword. Okay, cool. Thank you, Ashley. I am dying to know what the fuck that bullet is going to get used for, because I feel like that has to come into play. Maybe that'll be used to take care of one of the parents. I don't know. But that's pretty cool. She used Umber's magic to power up the sword to kill Umber. Did they collect the magic from Umber at all? Will that be used somewhere, or did that just like evaporate into the air? So then we have this weird scene where Quentin finally manages to convince Alice to eat something. And she is at first like pretty into it because she actually is very, very hungry. But then she gets grossed out at the fact that there's grease from the food, that her mouth was like water, like everything about the earthy parts of life are really fucking rubbing her the wrong way right now. She does not like it. And Quentin decides to sort of take advantage of that and wipe her hand for her. And she asks him, like as it suddenly overcomes her, why this feels so good. And he's watching her, like he seems to be sort of aware of it. And she reaches up and like touches his hair and then kisses him really quickly. And I really love her acting in this moment. It's like she's like unsure why she feels the urge to press her lips against his lips. She's just like, what is this? Why do I want to do this? I don't understand this, but I really want to do it. But why? Oh, I don't get it, but I'm going to do it anyway. And so they wind up having sex, which is like, as Quentin puts it, the end to a pretty good day, where he managed to save all of magic and kill a god and gets to bang his, he thought, long dead girlfriend. Well, then he gets informed of the reality of the situation, and that sort of puts a damper on things. Meanwhile, we have Katie, who goes to the deaf woman who was running Feed Buzz, or whatever the hell it was called, and asks her for help. And we don't really hear exactly what she wants, but we do hear the woman saying, well, listen, because she just starts out with, I need your help. And we cut immediately to them eating hot dogs and her saying, I'd like to help. I hate the librarians, and it sucks that Penny got poisoned. However, if I get exposed, then my work's done. And so am I. And she is really like trying to do something bigger. You know, she's there. I'm extremely curious about what the emergency was that was going on with the librarians, if it was related to the end of the world that was supposed to be happening, or if it was a whole separate thing, or if it has something to do with her specifically. Because it might be something that she is doing and she doesn't realize how much she's putting at risk. I don't know. But Katie says, I'm not going to beg or use guilt, but Penny is in the library and he can be your mole. He'd have to be alive to do that, though. And she's like, yeah, no, he wouldn't help us. He doesn't like me. He was not like into this whole idea. And Katie says, basically, I would be the mole, really. Like, in the end, I would just be asking him things that you need to know and relaying to you whatever the answer was that he gave me. And this woman is just like, yeah, doesn't that make you kind of a shitty girlfriend? And Katie's like, I mean, yeah, but that would also result in Penny being alive. So, hey, you know, win some, lose some. I guess I'm fine with being a shitty girlfriend if it means that he doesn't die. And I think that's fair. So then we get the scene with the plumber. And this dude is so odd looking. So first of all, he is very, very tall. I can't tell if he is like, he looks tall to me from my perspective in the show, but I can't tell if that's them just like doing a little bit of a camera trick. And he is going into the various areas in creation, one of them being the main classroom in Breakbills, another of them being the library, and he is straight up shutting magic off. He is shutting off the Wellspring access. And he is very pleased with himself. He is smiling the entire time that he does this. I really love that he leaves these like weird wet footprints behind him. And he shuts them off, shuts off the Fillory access just as Margot and Elliot turn a corner and they try to like catch up to him. And there is this weird like wall of magic in the way, which it's weird because he shut the access to magic off, but he still has this like shield up. So I'm guessing that is just like a protection afforded to him specifically while he's on the job. So at this point, Quentin and Alice have leapt out of bed and gotten dressed because they are sensing that some shit is happening. And he tries to light a candle with his usual casting, and he cannot do it. And then we jump ahead 2 months. And it's a really bizarre moment of seeing an actual fence that keeps Breakbills separated from the rest of this property that just says private property, no trespassing. And I am fucking dying to know what people thought when an entire campus appeared where there had seemingly been nothing. I am so curious. And inside, all of our friends are at their regular fucking desks doing their regular fucking theoretical homework, not practicing actual magic because they cannot do it. Quentin walks in and Alice is like giving him the cold shoulder, and there's a sort of look on his face that suggests to me, after that first time of sleeping together, that their relationship has not returned to normal. So I am figuring she's pretty pissed because she feels like he was an idiot, and she still like seems to have feelings for him in some way, but she doesn't know how to handle them. And this whole like discussion culminates in Dean Fogg saying that he does not expect magic to just suddenly appear again, the way that all of these various rumors they have been hearing seem to suggest. There are all different reports of like flashes of magic happening here and there. And he's like, no, it's gone. Now, eventually it may come back. But right now we need to work on this theoretical shit and keep focused, because if it does come back, we need to be prepared and we need to be able to use magic still. But y'all can't keep relying on these reports that are like going to get your hopes up. Alice, meanwhile, when she is leaving class, gets approached by that fucking Niffin monk who tells her, hey, do you remember that thing that happened with you? And I think he says the remora, which I am not positive, but is that the creature that was like in the sandbox that she fucked with? But yeah, he's like, you made enemies and one of them seeks you. Oh no, the lamprey. That's it. Not the remora, the lamprey. Hug-a-bug. Thank you. And he says it was most amusing at the time, but the lamprey, they have cause for vengeance. It knows you're weak and it knows you're here. And Alice basically has to take off at a dead fucking sprint because there's a gust of wind that suggests that it is coming for her right now at this very moment, which, interesting. So back in Fillory, in comes Fen, and she is here to warn them that the fairies are coming. And the camera pulls back, and they are in the throne room with them, and there are a lot of them outside the front gates as well. So I guess they expected these folks to do a better job of maintaining magic. And now that it is gone, I am not entirely sure what happens to the fairies, because they are able to appear and still like fly and everything. I don't know exactly what kind of handicap this is placed on them, but I guess we'll see. And then in the very, very last scene, Julia comes to see Quentin, and she's trying to cast, and he keeps on being like, girl, it's not going to work. We've all been trying. But then all of a sudden, there is a little bit of a spark. And this is the first sign of magic that they have seen in a fucking minute. And they are very, very excited. So that is the end of the episode. And I have no idea what's coming. But I feel like that was a pretty solid season finale. So I was very angry last episode. I feel better this episode. Let's hope it continues on this trajectory. I'm going to wrap up. Thank you very, very much to Nicole for commissioning this. I really appreciate it. And y'all, I'm excited. Yay! So I will be seeing you all again soon, hopefully next week, I think, with the next episode, the premiere of season 3. Until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.